have so many other things that I should be doing and even other things that I should be filming, but I was watching reaction videos all day and I was thinking about my reaction to last year's summer TBR. I really want to go back and watch my summer TBR from 2021 and see how many books I actually read off of that. As you well know, I don't really make TBRs. I do make TBR ASMRs, which maybe it would be fun to go back and react to those after a certain amount of time too and see how many of the books from those I've actually read. But those are very vague in my mind. Like, they're books that I want to read and I've kind of put aside to read for the upcoming month, but they're not set TBRs or things that I'm like really invested in reading all the time. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. My summer TBR is one that I made last year to just kind of keep in mind the like hyped books, the contemporary books, the Booktube Darlings that I wanted to read in June, July, and August. I started out with June and reading mostly queer books and then went on to the hype books. So let's see how many of those books I actually read. I was inspired to do this because I just made my summer 2022 TBR and I thought it would be cool to just look back and see. The first book that I see is Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl by Carrie Brownstein. This is Carrie Brownstein from Sleater-Kinney's memoir, and I did read this last year, and I think I did read it in June for Pride Month. It was okay. If you're a fan of Sleater-Kinney, I would definitely suggest checking it out because it's a lot more about the band than like her. I really wanted more story of like her story. The next book on this list is a zine. This was like the queer bodies issue, but I didn't read that. Oh, it's called Gender Stories. The next book is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This was again put in the June slot because it is a bisexual main character and I was really excited to read this one. I've heard so many good things about it. It's like a space opera. A lot of people who I know really like it. I did try to read this actually in September of 2021 for Space Opera September, but I couldn't get all the way through it. I ended up DNFing it at like 65%. It's a book that I think about going back to, and it is still on my DNF shelf. I haven't permanently DNF'd it yet. The next book is New Orleans Mourning, and this is in the Julie Smith series about Skip Langdon, which is all set in New Orleans. I had read one book in this series prior. I wanted to get to the first book in the series, New Orleans Mourning. I really enjoyed the first book I read, which was actually the third book in the series, so I was excited to get to another one. I did read New Orleans Mourning. I don't think it was in June. The next book on this list is Convenience Store Woman. I did read Convenience Store Woman in 2021 and it was one of my favorite books from that year. I really enjoyed that book. I really loved the representation of otherness and the service industry representation. I feel like I should start like a whole service industry readathon or like reading vlog or something. Even just figuring out what books have service industry involved in them. I just read a book by Stephen Graham Jones called The Night Cyclist, and this has a chef as a main character, and it was really interesting just to hear some of the service industry aspects of that. If you know any books containing the service industry, or if you know any books where the main character works in the service industry or revolves around the service industry, definitely let me know because I would love to read more books like that. The next book is The Water Cure, and this one was on my 20 books I found out about in 2020 that I wanted to read in 2021, and I did read it in 2021. I did read it during the summer months. This is not like a hyped booktube book, but I know that people who like it really like it, and I really liked it. It's one of the few books that I've read with multiple perspectives that I've really enjoyed. I skipped one. So there was one in between those two last books, and it was Final Girls by Riley Sager. And I have not read Final Girls by Riley Sager. I do like to have some thrillers or thrilling books to read over the summer months, to read like on beach holidays or at the beach, but I have not read Final Girls yet. I think part of the reason is that Riley Sager is a beloved Booktube author and people really like their books, but they're one of those authors that like everybody loves one book, but then they hate the next book, and then they love one book, and then they hate the next book. And it's different for every person which are the books that they love and which are the books that they hate. Final Girls is kind of unanimously one of their poorer books, one of their weaker books. But I did put it on this year's Summer TBR as well, so hopefully this is one that I will get to in summer of 2022. The next book is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, and I did read this in 2021, and I did read it in the summer of 2021, and then I lent it to my friend Haley. I was kind of mixed on it. I liked that it had bisexual representation, so it did work for June, and I think that is the month that I read it in. And it had some interesting like puzzle aspects and some interesting robot alien aspects that I hadn't read before that I really liked. But overall, I found the main character to be quite annoying and self-serving. This was mixed. I liked it okay. I would totally read the second book. I would like to know like kind of what happens after the end of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing. The next book on this list was The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware, and I did not read this in 2021 and I still haven't read it yet. It is on my Booktube spin list, and one of the reasons that I put it on my Booktube spin list was because I have read one other Ruth Ware. I read The Woman in Cabin 10 and I did not like that book at all. So I'm like hesitant to read The Death of Mrs Westaway, although I hear this one is way better. But it is on my Booktube spin list. This might be a good one to read this summer too. The new Booktube spin is coming up in July, so maybe I will get it and I'll be able to read it in the summer. Leave the World Behind by Ruben Alam. I did read this last year. I think I read it over the summer. Yeah, I definitely read it over the summer because I read it for summer hibernation, Simon Savage and Louise Savage's like readathon. I really liked this book. It was weird and it was off-putting in a lot of ways. There was some parts of the narration that I didn't like because this was multiple perspective, but it was like jumping from each person's head. So as opposed to a dual perspective or a multiple perspective where the perspectives changed each chapter, these just changed sentence to sentence, and I found that a little bit disconcerting when you were in the head of someone that I didn't want to know about, really. But overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm excited to see what Ruben Olam does next because this was a weird debut. The next book on this list is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, and I did read this, but I actually read it this year in February of 2022. I listened to it on audio, and Trevor Noah does the reading, which is great because he's South African, he has an amazing accent, but also, of course, it's his memoir, so he tells the stories exactly how they're supposed to be told. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I liked Trevor Noah's story, but I liked even more hearing about growing up in apartheid and the fall of apartheid, what apartheid means and how it was to live in South Africa during that huge time of change. It was one of several books that I've read about Africa this year, and it's really got me on an Africa kick just to learn more about the various cultures and countries and tribes that live in Africa. So fascinating. So if you like memoirs, I would definitely highly suggest Born a Crime. Especially if you like comedians. I'm not much of a comedian person, but if you like comedy and you like comedians, then I would definitely say pick this up. I don't really like comedy that much. I like things that are funny, but I don't like comedy. But I think that Trevor Noah is probably a comedian that I do like. I like comedians, if that makes sense. I like comedians who think about comedy and think about comedians and how they work and what makes comedy work. Jerry Seinfeld is very much one of those. There's lots of other comedians as well, but I like a thinking man's comedian, and I think Trevor Noah is that. The next book on this list I also put on my summer 2022 TBR. This is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. This is about a set of twins that can spontaneously combust. I've been wanting to read this for a long time, and I found a Book of the Month copy in a free little library, so hopefully I'm going to get to that one this summer. Anyway, The next book on this list is Stuart Turton's The Devil in the Dark Water. I'm a little bit more interested in his more famous book, which is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. That one is like a mystery. This one I think is a mystery as well, but The Devil in the Dark Water has something to do with like the devil on a ship, and it's really long. It's like 700 pages or something, so I haven't gotten to this one yet. I did put it in a pile to do a try a chapter, which was actually one of the videos I was going to film today, but I scrapped. I am still interested in this book, but I'm not like sold that I'm actually gonna read it. Funnily enough, the next book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is the one that I always confuse for Stuart Turton's other book. This is by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I did read this last summer, and I did read it on the beach. I actually really liked it. This would have worked for June as well because this also has a bisexual main character. It's a very beloved Booktube book, probably the most beloved on this 2021 TBR. It totally lived up to the hype. It was really good. It made me cry. It was really fun, really engaging in a way that made you feel... Marty, what are you doing? Like you were reading a real account of a person's life and not just a fictional story. I think it's kind of amazing how Taylor Jenkins Reid was able to do that. The last book on my summer 2021 TBR was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, and I did not read this book. I am still interested in reading it because it is like a retelling slash spiritual twin of Passing, and because everyone does love Britt Bennett. This is not one that I'm like dying to read. It definitely had a reason for being on that TBR with all those Booktube Darlings. I could have put it on this summer's TBR. It doesn't call out to me, so I do still want to read it, but I'm not going to get to it anytime soon. So those were all my 2021 summer TBR books. I read quite a few of them. I will put the read books here. Let me know if there's any books that you think I still really need to get to. Let me know which of the unread books that you would want to see me read the most, and maybe if one book kind of wins out over the other ones, I'll do that for a reading vlog. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!